The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes danger sound louder. Streetlights flickered, rain cutting through the dark. A woman fought to stay on her feet, clutching a small paper bag to her chest. The echo of laughter followed her. 8 men, half drunk, half cruel, closing in with no idea who they were about to destroy. Somewhere far away, a soldier's heart was still beating for her. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment on your city or country. Wind carried the taste of salt and metal. Fiona's old boots splashed through puddles as the alley stretched longer than she remembered. She wasn't supposed to be alone tonight. The grocery had closed early. Buses weren't running. So she walked, hands sliding over her swollen belly, murmuring a prayer that no one was listening to. Her husband's voice still lived inside her head, low, calm, comforting. Don't be afraid. You'll never walk alone. But he wasn't here anymore. His flag was folded, his uniform boxed away. The bag under her arm wasn't groceries. It held the ultrasound photo she'd had printed that morning. Her baby's first heartbeat. The proof that something good had survived the war. Then headlights cut across her path. A beat-up truck slowed beside her. Inside, faces smirked through the haze of beer smoke. A door slammed. Boots hit concrete. She froze. The rain grew heavier. "Hey, widow," one of them yelled. Her throat locked. No answer. They circled, dirty jeans, wet jackets, cigarettes still burning in their teeth. She backed up until her shoulder hit a brick wall. "Looks like she got something to hide," another said, eyeing the bag. "Might as well see what that is." A hand lunged. She clutched the bag tighter. "Please, that's nothing, just paper." They laughed. The laughter was cruel, hollow, the kind that feeds on fear. One shoved her down. The bag hit the ground. Mud splattered across the ultrasound envelope. She reached for it. A boot pinned her hand before she could touch it. The pain seared up her arm. Rain mixed with blood. "Stop," she whispered. "Please." But they had no reason to stop. Then a sound. A siren, distant but rising. The group panicked. Bottles rolled. Someone cursed. Cops. They took off into the night, their laughter fading with the sound of tires. One of them kicked the bag aside before running. Fiona crawled, barely breathing. The paper was torn but still there. Her trembling fingers pulled the ultrasound out, blurred, wet, but the little curve of life was still visible. She pressed it against her heart before everything went black. The echo of rain drowned the city until it all went silent. When dawn broke, hospital monitors beeped in slow rhythm. Nurses whispered in corners. Fiona's face was swollen beyond recognition. Tubes lined her wrist. The steady drip of morphine colored the air with quiet sorrow. Detectives asked questions. The sheriff gave short answers. "She's a widow. Wrong place, wrong time." Nothing more. But someone else was listening. A phone rang 3 states away. The ringtone that used to mean she's home safe. The man on the other side, tall, quiet, built from years of exhaustion and memory, picked it up. "Is this Adrian Miller?" Pause. "Yes." "The woman listed as your emergency contact. Fiona Miller. She's in critical condition." The line went dead. Adrian didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The same rain hit miles of highway as a black truck cut through the night. He hadn't stepped on a military base in 2 years. His hair was longer now, his hands steadier, but the discipline in his body hadn't left. The dashboard glow reflected off his dog tags, the same ones Fiona refused to bury after his discharge. Every stoplight blinked red. Every puddle looked like a mirror of the past. At the hospital gate, the guard recognized the look, not of anger, but silence that carried too much meaning. Adrian parked without answering a single question. Inside, the nurse took a nervous step closer. "She's stable for now, but she hasn't woken up yet." He walked past her. The hallway smelled like bleach and endings. When he saw Fiona on the bed, everything inside him stopped moving. The monitors beeped slow. Her hand twitched. The ultrasound photo rested on the table beside her, wrinkled and mud-stained. He picked it up, wiped the paper clean with his thumb. The watermarks blurred the outline of the baby, but the heartbeat number was still visible in black ink. A Marine chaplain entered quietly behind him. "She's strong. The doctor said it's a miracle she survived." Adrian didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on that small flicker of life printed on paper. A war hero who'd seen blood and rubble was now shaking at the image of his unborn child. The chaplain hesitated. "They said she was attacked by locals, some teens maybe. Sheriffs already making statements." Adrian finally turned, his voice calm but hollow. "Show me their names." The chaplain blinked, unsure whether to answer. "Show me their faces," he repeated, lower this time. Hours later, Adrian sat in the hospital parking lot under a flickering lamp. The sheriff exited a cruiser, joking with another officer. The arrogance hit Adrian like static. He watched closely. 8 blurred figures in the photos on the sheriff's phone passed casually from officer to officer. He memorized every face. The nurse from earlier, Harper, came running. "Sir, your wife," she moved. "You should come." Adrian followed, barely breathing. Fiona's lips twitched as her eyes fluttered open. The moment stretched forever. He held her wrist softly. She whispered something barely audible, not words, just breaths. He bent closer, and in the slow drag of air, caught a single phrase: "Don't lose yourself again." Tears gathered behind his eyes, but didn't fall. He'd buried too many men to cry easily now. She drifted back in his sleep, and Adrian stood still as machines hummed like ghosts around them. He noticed something then: a brown envelope beside her chart. Her nurse must have placed it there. Inside, security stills. Blurry figures, Alley Rain, one caught mid-strike with his face tilted toward the camera. Adrian studied it for 5 seconds, folded it twice, slid it into his jacket. By midnight, he was no longer in the hospital. His jacket zipped, boots laced tight. The streets of Blackwood looked the same as the night Fiona fell: wet, cold, honest. A camera near the alley flickered. Adrian rewound its last 24 hours on a laptop balanced against the hood of his truck. Each second burned into his mind. 8 faces, 5 tattoos, 1 name tag: E. Harris, the sheriff's son. He sat there in silence until the footage ended. Then he closed the laptop. He didn't shout or curse. He didn't even breathe faster. He just placed the ultrasound photo gently on the passenger seat, next to his old seal knife, the one Fiona once told him she hated. The screen of his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. A female voice, quiet, hesitant. "You don't know me, but I saw what happened. Meet me behind the old diner tomorrow. Midnight." Adrian's eyes didn't move from the rain sliding down his windshield. "Who is this?" "Lila," she said. Then the line cut off. He sat there another minute, thinking nothing, just listening to the rain. Finally, he whispered, almost to himself, "You're not walking alone anymore." And with that, he drove back into the storm. The hospital parking lot was empty when Adrian returned just before sunrise. He hadn't slept. His body didn't need it anymore. Years of deployment had trained him to function on adrenaline and purpose alone. He sat in his truck, staring at the cracked dashboard, replaying every second of that security footage in his mind. 8 faces, 8 names he didn't know yet. But he would. Inside the hospital, Fiona's monitors still beeped in rhythm. Adrian entered her room quietly, like he was walking into sacred ground. She hadn't woken again since last night. The doctors said her body was fighting. Her baby's heartbeat was stable, but the trauma had left scars deeper than bruises. He pulled a chair close to her bed and placed his hand over hers. Her skin felt cold. He wanted to say something, anything that might reach her through the fog of pain and sedation. But words had never been his strength. So he just sat there, watching her breathe. A nurse entered, not Harper this time, but an older woman with tired eyes and a clipboard. She glanced at Adrian, then at Fiona, and sighed softly. "She's a fighter," the nurse said. "Most people wouldn't have survived what she went through." Adrian nodded once, his jaw tight. The nurse hesitated, then added, "The police came by earlier. They said it was random. Wrong place, wrong time. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But between you and me, I don't think they're looking very hard. Adrian's eyes shifted to her, sharp and cold. Why not? She glanced toward the door, lowering her voice. One of the boys involved, his father works in law enforcement. That's all I'm saying. She left before Adrian could respond. He sat back, processing the confirmation of what he already suspected. Corruption ran deeper than he thought. The sheriff wasn't just delaying the investigation. He was burying it. Adrian stood and walked to the window. Outside, the town of Blackwood stretched out under gray skies. It looked peaceful from up here. Quiet. Safe. But Adrian knew better. He'd seen quiet towns hide the worst kind of evil before, in Iraq, Afghanistan, places where silence meant complicity. This town was no different. By midday, Adrian was driving through the center of Blackwood. The streets were lined with old brick buildings, faded storefronts, and American flags hanging from porches. People waved at each other from pickup trucks. Kids rode bikes past the corner store. It looked like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. But Adrian knew the truth now. Somewhere in this town, 8 men were walking free, laughing, living their lives like they hadn't destroyed his. He parked outside a small diner called Maggie's, the kind of place where locals ate breakfast and traded gossip. He needed information, and diners were always good for that. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. A waitress, young, blonde, name tag reading Lila, looked up as he entered. Her eyes lingered on him for a second too long, like she recognized something she shouldn't have. Adrian sat at the counter and ordered black coffee. Nothing else. Lila poured it slowly, her hands shaking just enough to be noticeable. She glanced around the diner, making sure no one was listening, then leaned in slightly. "You're him, aren't you?" she whispered. Adrian didn't respond. "The husband," she continued. "The one who just got back." He met her eyes. "How do you know that?" Lila swallowed hard. "Because I know who did it. And I know why they're getting away with it." Adrian's grip tightened on the coffee cup. "Keep talking." She glanced toward the kitchen, then back at him. "Not here. Meet me tonight. Behind the old gas station on Route 9. Midnight. Why should I trust you?" Lila's expression softened, guilt flickering across her face. "Because I should have stopped it. And I didn't." Before Adrian could ask more, the cook called her name from the back. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked away, leaving Adrian alone with his coffee and the weight of her words. The rest of the day crawled by. Adrian drove past the sheriff's office twice, studying the layout, memorizing patrol patterns. He noted which officers smoked outside, which ones left their radios in their cars. He wasn't planning violence, not yet, but he was planning something. By evening, he was back at the hospital. Fiona still hadn't woken. Harper, the younger nurse, stopped by to check her vitals. "Any change?" Adrian asked. Harper shook her head. "Not yet, but her baby's heartbeat is strong. That's a good sign." Adrian looked down at Fiona's pale face, her swollen eyes, the bandages wrapped around her ribs. Rage simmered beneath his skin, but he forced it down. Control was everything. Emotion made soldiers reckless, and he couldn't afford that. Harper hesitated before speaking again. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian nodded. "What are you going to do?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on Fiona, on the faint rise and fall of her chest. "Whatever it takes," he finally said. Harper studied him for a moment, then quietly left the room. Midnight came fast. Adrian pulled up to the abandoned gas station on Route 9. The building was dark, windows boarded up, weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. A single streetlight flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the lot. Lila's car was already there, a beat-up sedan parked near the edge of the property. Adrian stepped out of his truck, scanning the area instinctively. Old habits. He approached slowly, his hand resting near the knife tucked into his jacket. Lila got out of her car, arms crossed against the cold. She looked smaller now, vulnerable in the dim light. "You came," she said, almost surprised. You said you know who did this. Lila nodded, her breath visible in the night air. I do. But before I tell you, you need to understand something. Adrian waited. This town, it's not what it looks like. The sheriff, his son, half the police force, they're all connected. They cover for each other. Always have. Names, Adrian said flatly. Lila pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. 8 young men standing outside a bar, arms around each other, laughing. One of them wore a varsity jacket. Another had a badge clipped to his belt. That's Evan Harris, Lila said, pointing to the one in the center. Sheriff's son. He's the one who started it. The others just followed. Adrian memorized every face. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Lila's voice cracked. Because I was there that night. I saw what they did, and I didn't stop them. Silence stretched between them. I was scared, she continued. Scared of what they'd do to me if I said anything. But then I found out she was pregnant, and I couldn't live with it anymore. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Where do they hang out? Lila hesitated. There's an old cabin, about 10 miles north, off County Road 12. They go there to drink, to hide things. If you're looking for proof, you'll find it there. Adrian turned to leave. Wait, Lila called after him. What are you going to do? He paused, looking back over his shoulder. What I was trained to do. And with that, he disappeared into the darkness. Back in his truck, Adrian sat in silence, staring at the photo Lila had sent to his phone. 8 faces. 8 targets. He pulled out the ultrasound photo from his jacket pocket, holding it carefully in the dim glow of the dashboard light. His thumb traced the outline of the tiny heartbeat. I'm not losing you, he whispered to the image. Either of you. He started the engine and drove into the night, headlights cutting through the fog. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. The storm had rolled in heavy by the time Adrian reached the northern woods. The sky was torn open by lightning, rain hammering down hard enough to wash away tire tracks, the kind of weather that hides sins. He pulled over just beyond the old county road and killed the headlights. Ahead, through the trees, he could make out the dull orange glow of a campfire inside a half-collapsed cabin. He sat still for a long moment, listening. The forest whispered with rain, wind, and faint voices carried from the cabin. Drunken laughter, shouts, the clink of bottles. Exactly what he expected. Adrian slipped out of the truck, rain soaking through his jacket within seconds. The ground was mud and roots, but he moved light, silent, muscle memory taking over. 1,000 nights like this back in service. Only this one mattered more than any mission he'd ever been sent on. He crouched beside a tree near the cabin's edge. Through the broken window, he counted them. Not all 8, but 5. 3 missing. Beer cans lined the porch rail. One of them, tall with a buzz cut, threw something into the fire and laughed. The laughter sent a chill down Adrian's spine. It was too carefree, too human for monsters. He waited, memorizing every motion, every voice, the way they carried themselves, relaxed, fearless, like no consequence could ever touch them. Then he saw it, hanging from the wall inside the cabin, a tiny silver bracelet, snapped, crusted with dirt. Fiona's, her name still engraved underneath. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. He forced them open again. Control. Stay in control. He moved backwards, blending into the trees, circling around until he reached the rear of the cabin. A side door hung open, half off its hinges. He pushed it slowly, inch by inch, until the hinge squeaked. Inside smelled of smoke and oil. On the table, photos, empty wallets, a blood-stained rag. He scanned everything, committing each item to memory. Every detail was a breadcrumb leading closer to the truth. Then he found it. Near the corner, a crumpled sheet of paper that looked like part of a police report, with the sheriff's signature scrawled across the bottom. At the very top, in smudged ink, case closed, insufficient evidence. He stared at the words until they burned into his vision. The sheriff had killed the case before it even started. Something inside him shifted, Not rage, not grief, but something quieter. A decision. He folded the paper, slid it into his pocket, and stepped outside into the downpour. The next morning, he was back in town. The diner was quieter now, half the tables empty. Lila looked different, tired, nervous. She froze when she saw him walk in, soaked to the bone, mud spattered across his sleeves. "You went there." Her voice trembled more than she wanted it to. Adrian nodded. 5 of them were there. Her eyes widened. "What did you do?" "Watched," he said simply. "Learned." Lila exhaled, unsure if she was relieved or terrified. "The others, they're probably hiding. News travels fast here." Adrian looked at her, calm but intense. "I need to know everything you know about the sheriff." Lila hesitated, biting her lip. "He's worse than you think. He runs this town like his own property. The other cops, they owe him money, favors, secrets. He doesn't protect people. He buries them." "Why?" Adrian asked. "Because his son, Evan," she stopped, lowering her eyes. "He's untouchable here. Always has been. His father made sure of it." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Where can I find him?" Lila glanced around, whispering, "You didn't hear this from me. The sheriff and his son spend every Friday night at the Silverhand Bar. South Side. Private room in the back." Adrian stood, finishing his untouched coffee. "Thank you." She caught his arm before he could leave. "Please, be careful. They don't just ruin people. They erase them." He looked at her, voice even. "I was erased once already." Then he walked out, leaving her staring after him through the fogged window. At sunset, the sheriff's cruiser sat outside the Silverhand Bar, paint gleaming under neon lights. Adrian parked across the street, watching for a while. He recognized the sheriff immediately, broad, gray-haired, the kind of man used to giving orders without being questioned. His son, Evan, stood beside him, laughing with a friend. That same laugh from the cabin fire. The whole town revolved around those two. And for years, no one had dared stop them. Adrian stepped out of the shadows only after they went inside. He followed quietly, blending in with the late-night crowd, the smell of whiskey and sweat filling the room. Country music hummed faintly from cracked speakers. In the mirror behind the counter, their reflections flickered. Father and son, heads bent close together, whispering. Adrian didn't move closer. He simply watched. Every expression, every gesture, the faint smirk on the sheriff's lips, the arrogance, the ease. He finished his glass, left some cash on the counter, and slipped outside without a sound. The night air felt colder now. He stood under the streetlight, raindrops glittering on the brim of his cap. For the first time since Fiona was attacked, a plan began to shape in his mind. Not wild revenge, not destruction, but precision. He wouldn't become them. He'd expose them. He'd dismantle their power piece by piece, until they answered for every bruise on her body. 2 streets away, a pair of headlights flared in his rearview mirror, tailing him for half a block. Adrian turned down a side road, lights still following. He slowed, letting the truck behind come closer, then suddenly stopped. A young man jumped out, no badge, just a baseball cap pulled low. "Hey, you don't belong here." Adrian didn't answer. "Yeah, I heard about you," the man sneered. "The war vet playing detective. That your idea of justice." He never finished the sentence. Adrian moved before he even saw it. Quick, silent, one hand twisting the man's wrist, pushing him hard against the truck without a word. "Who sent you?" Adrian asked. The sheriff," he gasped. "He told us to keep an eye on anyone asking questions." Adrian loosened his grip, letting the man collapse onto the wet asphalt. "Tell him I know his name's on that report." He turned, got into his truck, and drove off. The tail lights vanished into the fog, leaving the man shaking on the ground, rain washing over his face like guilt made visible. Back at the hospital, the night nurse startled when Adrian pushed open the door. Fiona was still unconscious. Machines hummed, lights blinking slow. He stood beside her again, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "They think I'll lose control," he whispered under his breath. But that's not how this ends. He traced a finger over her wrist where the bruises faded slightly under the light. Then he placed something small on her table, the sheriff's folded report, creased and wet. Harper entered quietly, carrying fresh linen. She noticed the paper, frowned. "What's that?" "Truth," Adrian said, stepping back. "They tried to bury it. Not anymore." Harper looked between him and Fiona, realizing there was more happening here than she could ever write in a hospital note. As he walked out, thunder cracked overhead, echoing through the hallway. It didn't sound like weather anymore. It sounded like we're coming home. Adrian didn't sleep that night. He sat in the truck, watching the rain bead against the windshield, his mind replaying Lila's words again and again. A cabin, 10 miles north. Proof. The road there wound through thick forest and open fields, the kind of countryside that swallowed sound. He parked far enough away that the engine couldn't be heard and continued on foot, boots crunching in wet leaves. The air smelled like pine and rot, a place that had kept too many secrets for too long. The cabin stood in a small clearing, crooked and stubborn against the storm. The porch sagged, shutters hanging loose. Faint music carried through the half-broken window, an old radio playing somewhere inside. Adrian waited in the trees, counting shadows. Two men stumbled out laughing, bottles still in hand. They wandered toward the outhouse, voices slurring above the rain. Adrian stayed still, letting them go far enough to disappear behind the trees. Then he approached. Inside, the music cut through static, a country song playing low. A single bulb flickered near the ceiling. Beer cans scattered on the table beside a stack of stolen phones and wallets. The smell of gasoline clung to everything. He took in each detail, each stain, each sign of her torment. Then he saw something that made his pulse stop, a tattered hospital bracelet lying near a pile of rags. Her name still printed faintly across it. Fiona Miller. He lifted it carefully, his wet hands trembling despite the cold discipline seared into him from years of war. Every scar on his hands, every callus, every ache felt alive again. He slipped the bracelet into his pocket and stepped further inside. Lightning flashed. For a split second, the entire cabin flared white, revealing a wall covered with graffiti and photos. Adrian's stomach twisted. Some were blurry phone pictures, some printed. Every image showed the same night: headlights, rain, shadows. One photo caught Fiona's face mid-turn, helpless, terrified. He forced himself to breathe. The door creaked. Voices returned. Adrian slipped into the narrow hall, footsteps silent, eyes cold. Two of the men burst in, shouting at each other about missing money. They didn't notice the door edge closing behind them. Their laughter died when they saw the photos scattered across the floor, placed there deliberately. Adrian watched from the dark as confusion spread. Then fear. They didn't even see him move. One fell with a choked breath, the other against the wall, blood from a split lip dripping onto his shirt. No sound loud enough to carry beyond the rain. Adrian stood over them. "You remember her." His voice was quiet, even. "You left her for dead." The taller man looked up, groaning. "Who the hell?" A single tap of a flashlight across his face cut the question short. Adrian leaned down, gaze unflinching. "You will remember every second of what you did." He didn't hit them again. He didn't need to. Their terror was enough. He walked out, leaving them breathing, shaking. Let them tell the others. Outside, rain turned the dirt road into a river of mud. Adrian walked until the cabin lights faded behind him. It wasn't peace he felt. It was purpose. By noon he was back in town. The sheriff's cruiser wasn't parked at the station anymore. That meant he was out, maybe at his house, maybe cleaning up after his son's mess. Adrian didn't care where. He wasn't ready to face him yet. Inside the diner, Lila sat by the window, nervously stirring cold coffee. When she saw him, she stood immediately. "You went there again, didn't you?" "They keep trophies," he said, voice low. "Her bracelet. Pictures." Lila covered her mouth. "Oh God." Adrian looked outside, scanning reflections in the glass. "You said you were scared that night. What were you doing there?" She shook her head, tears gathering but never falling. They said it was just a prank. That's all. They told me they'd just scare her, take her bag, make her cry. I didn't know. He turned toward her fully now, expression unreadable. Who planned it? She hesitated. Evan. He told them she was rich, that she got money after her husband died in the service. He said she carried cash everywhere. Adrian clenched his jaw. She was carrying an ultrasound. Lila looked down, shoulders curling inward, guilt roaring through her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know until after. He nodded once, not forgiving, but understanding. There's still one place I haven't checked. That evening he drove past the sheriff's large colonial house. Floodlights illuminated the front yard. A carved sign by the mailbox read Harris Residence. The perfect picture of small-town authority. From across the street, behind an old oak tree, Adrian used binoculars to watch. The sheriff stepped out with his son, both in casual clothes, laughing like nothing had happened. They loaded fishing gear into the truck. Their freedom looked obscene under the soft sunset glow. Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. They found the cabin. Police headed there. You need to see this. He didn't hesitate. Minutes later, his truck tore down the same road again. When he arrived, the place was crawling with squad cars. Yellow tape around the porch, camera flashes lighting up the dark. Officers talked quietly near the sheriff himself, who stood dry under an umbrella while rain soaked the scene. Adrian parked far away, watching from behind trees. One of the officers handed the sheriff something in a plastic bag, Fiona's bracelet. The sheriff studied it, then said something too soft to hear, shaking his head. That smooth, rehearsed sadness for the camera flashed across his face. Adrian's fists tightened. The man was turning evidence into performance, saving his son again. The next day, Fiona opened her eyes for the first time in days. Harper nearly dropped her clipboard calling for the doctor. Adrian was there instantly, his dark eyes softening the moment she blinked. She looked fragile, voice weak. Where's the baby? He leaned close. Still safe. Still strong. Her lips trembled into the faintest smile, then fell. They found them. Not all yet, he said quietly. But soon. A tear rolled down her temple. Don't let hate take you. Adrian's breath caught, but he nodded slowly. I won't. I promise. She drifted back to sleep, her breathing steady. He stayed there, holding her hand until dawn bled gray through the blinds. When he finally left, he dropped something off at the nurse's station, a small wrapped package. Inside was a flash drive, labeled in black marker. Truth. Every photo from the cabin. Every file. Every face. He walked out into the cold morning. In town, whispers had already begun. People talked about corruption, about crimes ignored, about kids protected because of their fathers. Fear had shifted. It no longer belonged to Adrian or Fiona. It belonged to those who thought they ruled the town. The sheriff drove by, his son sitting smugly beside him, neither aware of the storm closing in around them. Adrian watched them go, expression flat, but eyes burning with purpose. The next move wouldn't be rushed. It would be surgical. He turned back toward the woods, slipping the faded picture of the ultrasound from his jacket. The paper was creased, edges damaged, but that heartbeat line was still visible. He folded it again, carefully, and tucked it into his chest pocket. He whispered into the wind, almost to her, almost to the child who'd never yet seen daylight. Almost done. Just a little longer. And then he walked into the fog until the forest swallowed him whole. The forest was quieter the next night, only wind whispering through the branches. Adrian knew silence could deceive. He'd lived too long with the sound of danger hiding behind calm. He waited near the old river road, parked halfway in the shadows, headlights off. From where he sat, he could see the faint lights of the sheriff's hunting lodge flickering across the trees. He wasn't here to attack, not yet. Tonight was about exposure. He checked the clock on the dash, 1:43 a.m. Perfect. They'd be asleep, drunk, careless. Adrian stepped out, moving along the tree line. Every step deliberate, soundless. The old soldier in him never died. It just had different work now. He reached the back window, knife from his pocket glinting as he slid it between the frame and sill. A quiet click, the lock gave way. Inside smelled like whiskey and damp wood. Family photos on the mantel, a deer head on the wall, trophies of a man who believed he owned everything he saw. Adrian's eyes settled on a table near the couch where the sheriff's laptop sat open. A folder on the screen read, Case Inventory / Fiona Miller. His pulse slowed. He clicked it open. The files weren't evidence. They were covered documents, falsified signatures, timestamps erased. Digital destruction of truth. He copied the entire contents to a drive he'd brought, then scrolled lower. There it was, emails between the sheriff and a local judge. Keep it sealed. My boy doesn't need the attention. Widow's medical bills are taken care of. Consider it closed. That single line burned like acid. His free hand tensed until blood beat at his fingertips. He could make it all disappear again. Delete, crash, burn the machine. But he didn't. The truth had to live, even if vengeance wanted to erase everything. He pulled the drive free and pocketed it. Then a noise behind him, floorboard creak. His knife turned instinctively. Evan Harris stepped into the room, half awake, t-shirt and jeans, a pistol hanging loose in his hand. He froze when he saw Adrian's face. You, what the hell? Evan started. Adrian was across the room before the boy could raise the gun. The barrel hit the carpet, Adrian's hand twisting it away, wrist locked, shoulder forced. Evan grunted in pain as the weapon clattered out of reach. Get off me, man. You can't just, my dad's gonna ruin you. Adrian pressed him against the wall, breathing calm, voice cold as rain. You already ruined yourself when you touched her. Evan's fear flickered into arrogance. She had cash. She fought back. It was supposed to be easy. Adrian's jaw tightened. You call beating a pregnant woman easy. Evan's mouth opened, but no words came. Adrian stepped closer, whisper low enough only he could hear. You'll face justice. Not the kind your father buys, but the kind that doesn't get erased. He let the boy go. Evan stumbled, gasping as if he'd dodged death. Adrian turned for the door. You're crazy. Evan spat behind him. Everyone in this town knows my dad owns the law. Adrian paused at the threshold. Not for long. Before leaving, he pocketed the sheriff's badge from the mantel, a symbol of false authority that would soon mean nothing. By morning, buzz had spread through town, 2 unidentified men seen fighting near the Harris property. The sheriff's official statement blamed trespassers trying to steal hunting gear. But behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. The diner that used to hum with laughter now fell silent when his cruiser passed. People knew something had changed. Meanwhile, Adrian sat across from Lila in a parking lot behind the church. The sun was just breaking, painting gold through fog. She looked scared, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. You've started something, she said. You think you can take down the sheriff? People disappear trying. People disappear when no one tries, Adrian answered. You don't know what he's capable of. I do. Lila searched his expression, finding nothing but calm purpose. What now? Adrian handed her a single envelope. Inside's a flash drive. Give it to the reporter you trust most. What's on it? The truth. She nodded slowly, gripping it tight, like a lifeline. And you? I'm going back to the cabin tonight. The other 3 will come back to clean up their mess. She caught his arm as he turned to leave. Adrian, she said quietly, don't lose yourself doing this. He stopped. I already did the night they touched her. That night, storm clouds pressed heavy above the county line. The wind had that frozen edge before lightning, rattling everything not nailed down. Adrian parked far from view, trekking through familiar mud toward the cabin again. This time, he wasn't alone. He could hear them, 3 voices echoing through the trees. Nervous, angry. One of them shouted. Evan said burn the place. He's losing it. Forget Evan. The cops are sniffing around. We get rid of everything. Adrian crouched beside a fallen log, watching them through the rain as they argued, tossing empty gas cans onto the porch. They hadn't noticed the tripwire yet, one he'd set earlier, simple and quiet. When one crossed it, a small flash went off, a camera shutter. Documentation, not destruction. They froze. Too late. Adrian stepped out of the trees. No mask, no weapon in his hands, just eyes that didn't blink. Run if you want, he said evenly. But this time, people will see your faces. The first man cursed, bolting for the truck. The second followed, slipping in the mud. The third turned and stared, young, trembling. Who are you? The husband, Adrian said, then turned away, leaving them screaming into the storm. He didn't chase. Justice had already begun. Later that night, an anonymous email landed in 3 inboxes. One local reporter, one federal agent, one judge. Attached were files, recordings, photos, and timestamps. Everything tied together. That same night, Adrian sat beside Fiona's hospital bed again. Her color was better now. Machines quieter. Harper smiled softly at him. She's improving. Baby too. Adrian nodded, eyes on Fiona. She deserves peace. She will, Harper said. You can rest now, right? He didn't answer. His phone buzzed. A message from Lila. They're running. Reports out in the morning. Adrian's lips curved into something between pain and relief. He reached for Fiona's hand, whispering softly. Almost there. Thunder rolled through the night. But for the first time in weeks, it sounded less like war and more like closure moving closer. By dawn, the town was breathing rumors. The sheriff had vanished before sunrise. 3 of the thugs were missing. The police said investigation ongoing. But half the town already knew the truth. Something had shifted. Someone was fighting back. Inside St. Helena Hospital, the world felt slower, quieter, like time was exhaling after holding its breath too long. Fiona was awake now, fragile but alive. Morning light touched her face as she stared out the window, hands resting over her stomach. Harper stepped in carrying a tray of breakfast she knew Fiona wouldn't eat. You're healing faster than anyone expected, she said softly. Fiona offered a faint smile. I don't feel healed. Harper sat beside her bed. You have hope. That's close enough. A silence filled the room. Machines hummed. Nurses' shoes squeaked somewhere down the hall. Finally, Fiona spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. He hasn't visited since last night, has he? Harper shook her head. No, but every morning, I find fresh flowers by your bed. He's around. Fiona traced the petals of the latest sunflower bouquet. He's slipping into himself again, isn't he? Harper nodded carefully. Maybe, but what he's doing, it's for you. Fiona's eyes softened, but the sadness in them ran deep. He doesn't know how to stop. He only knows how to protect, even if it kills him. Across town, Adrian sat inside a warehouse near the old shipping yard. The place smelled of rust and gasoline. His laptop screen glowed faint blue in the dark. On it, dozens of new emails. Reporters, federal agents, even distant acquaintances. Every file he'd sent last night was spreading like wildfire. Screenshots of the police corruption had already reached national feeds. Photos from the scene, the forged case records, the sheriff's emails, everything. He leaned back, closing his eyes, exhaustion pressing against his ribs. He'd fought wars for his country, but this was the first one that felt personal, blood in the soil kind of personal. The vibration of his phone dragged him back. Number unknown. He answered anyway. Adrian. The voice cracked. It was Lila. You need to get back to the hospital. Now. What's wrong? They came for her. The line went dead before he could respond. The world blurred. Tires screeched. Cars honked. Adrian drove through red lights like they didn't exist. Rain hammered down, wind roaring through the half-open window. When he burst into the hospital parking lot, 2 squad cars were already there. Officers standing near the entrance. Their uniforms bore no county symbols. Federal. That was a good sign. But it didn't calm him. Inside, chaos. Nurses whispering, Harper pacing. Fiona's room door open, heart monitor beeping faster than normal. He stepped in, soaking wet. Harper looked up, startled. She's fine. Physically fine. But Fiona was sitting upright, tears streaming silently down her face. They took the file, she said weakly. What file? The flash drive you left, she whispered. Uniformed officers came. Said it was evidence. I tried to tell them it wasn't safe here. They took it all. Adrian's pulse slowed. Did they show badges? Fiona shook her head. Just uniforms. He realized instantly. They weren't federal. They were local, loyal to the sheriff. His last desperate act before the system fell on him. He leaned closer. Did they hurt you? Her head moved slowly, no? But you can't keep fighting them alone, Adrian. It will swallow you. Her fingers reached for his. Please, let this go. He wanted to. But the fight wasn't about choice anymore. It was about truth. That evening, in the hospital chapel, Adrian sat alone under dim amber light. Rain tapped softly against stained glass windows. The room smelled like old wood and candle wax. He stared at the small cross at the front, thinking about all the people he'd watched die overseas. Men who'd believed in justice as clean as a flag. But justice wasn't clean. It was messy, stitched with pain and compromise. Harper entered quietly, standing behind him. You dropped this, she said, handing him an envelope. It was found near the nurse's station. Inside, a note, written in familiar scrawl. You took one of mine. I took yours. Come to the old quarry tonight, if you ever want to see her again. E.H. Evan Harris. Adrian's knuckles went white around the paper. He made a move, he said, voice breaking its calm for the first time. Harper stepped closer, whispering. Adrian, the feds are already on their way now. Don't go alone. Don't do something you can't take back. His eyes lifted to hers, cold and haunted. I don't need backup. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. The soldier had returned. Harper grabbed his wrist. If you run in there like a soldier, you'll die like one. Think. Fiona needs you alive. Adrian hesitated. The words cracked something fragile inside him. He exhaled, steadying. I'll bring her home, or I won't come back. Without another word, he walked out into the storm. 2 miles outside town, headlights cut through sheets of rain as Adrian climbed the rocky path leading to the quarry. The place spread open like a crater, dark, with pools of muddy water glowing faint under lightning. He saw the reflection first, the sheriff's truck parked near the edge. And beside it, Evan, pacing, waving a flashlight wildly. Fiona wasn't in sight. Adrian shut the engine, stepped out, boots sinking in mud. Where is she? He called. Evan smirked, voice echoing against the stone. You think this ends because you posted some files online. My father's gone, but I'm still here. Adrian moved closer. Where is she, Evan? She's. Evan gestured toward a small boat at the quarry's edge. Someone was inside, tied to the seat, head bowed. She's your reminder that heroics don't work here. Adrian took another step forward. You made one mistake, Evan. Evan cocked his head, sarcasm dripping. Yeah, and what's that? You thought silence buys safety. Before Evan could react, another flash of headlights swept across the quarry. Federal SUVs roared in from the opposite ridge, lights piercing the fog. Officers with tactical gear poured out, guns drawn. Someone yelled through a megaphone, federal agents. Stand down. Evan froze, eyes wide. He dropped the flashlight, backing away as armed men surrounded him. Adrian didn't move, rain plastering his jacket to his skin. He rushed to the boat, where Fiona sat tied, her face pale but conscious. You're okay, he said, breaking the ropes with shaking hands. She looked up, tears mixing with rain. You found me, she whispered. Adrian helped her out of the boat, wrapping his arm around her. Always. Nearby, agents handcuffed Evan as he shouted curses into the storm. For once, no one listened. Back in the hospital later that night, as rain softened into drizzle, Adrian sat beside Fiona's bed again. Machines hummed gently, a softer rhythm now. She looked at him, voice faint. It's over. Almost, he said quietly. The sheriff's in custody. Evan confessed enough to bury them both. Her lips trembled in a smile. You kept your promise. Adrian brushed a hand over hers. I kept us alive. Through the window, morning light began to break through the clouds. For the first time, peace didn't feel impossible. Far away, in a quiet office, the federal judge reviewed Adrian's file. Among the paperwork sat the ultrasound photo Fiona carried that night, crumpled but preserved. Now, finally, it meant life, not grief. Morning brought still air and a quiet so heavy it pressed against the hospital windows. For once, no sirens, no shouting in the halls. Even the monitors in Fiona's room seemed to hum softer. The storm had passed, but something colder lingered in its place. Silence that comes after victory, when you realize you're still standing, yet the ground beneath you has changed forever. Adrian hadn't left her side since dawn. The federal agents came, took statements, collected evidence. One by one, they confirmed every file and image he'd leaked was true. The sheriff's operations were done, their entire network collapsing under its own lies. But beneath the relief, Adrian could feel something wrong, unfinished, like a voice whispering through the back of his mind telling him it wasn't over. When Harper entered, she carried 2 cups of coffee and that look all nurses get when they've seen too much and can't unsee any of it. You should sleep, she said gently. Adrian took the cup, but didn't drink. Can't. You've been awake for 3 nights straight. Fiona's safe. The baby's okay. There's nothing left to fight now. That's what I thought after my last deployment, he said, eyes still on Fiona. Then came the ambush. Harper didn't reply. She just watched him stare at Fiona like he was guarding one last mission. Outside in the hallway, Lila waited, pacing small circles near the door. When Harper stepped out, she whispered, "Can I see him?" Harper nodded slowly. "He's on edge. Don't mention Harris again. Let him breathe." Lila nodded and stepped inside softly. Adrian turned immediately, every part of him still alert. "Didn't expect to see you here." Lila swallowed. "I came to tell you the agents want me to testify. About that night. About what I saw." "You should," he said flatly. "There's something else," she continued, fingers twisting nervously. "You said the sheriff and his son covered for everyone, but it wasn't just them." She hesitated. Someone else was feeding them money, keeping them protected. Adrian's brow lifted slightly. "Who?" Lila's voice cracked. "Kyle." He froze. "Kyle who?" "Fiona's brother-in-law," Lila whispered. "She mentioned him once, said he helped her after you left for deployment. He's the one who told the sheriff she'd be walking through that street with cash in her bag. He thought she'd be an easy target. But when she was hurt, he panicked. He paid to keep his name out of everything." Adrian didn't move. The words hit harder than any punch. He stared at the wall, piecing it together. Every unknown detail, every unanswered question. "She trusted him," Adrian murmured. "He visited her after I deployed. He visited my home." Lila nodded, guilt pulling at her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't know until the feds interviewed me. He's been wiring money to the Harris family for months." Adrian leaned his elbows against his knees, silent for a long moment. His voice was calm when he finally spoke. "Does Fiona know?" "No," Lila said. "I didn't want to tell her yet. She's been through enough." He exhaled slowly. "She deserves the truth. But not yet. Not like this." That evening, Fiona was moved to a recovery suite overlooking the courtyard. The rain had stopped, sunlight reflecting off the wet pavement below. She looked stronger, color returning to her face. When Adrian came in, she smiled faintly. "You still haven't slept. I'll sleep when you're home." She studied his face for a long moment. "You've changed," she said softly. "Not broken, just heavier." He sat beside her, taking her hand carefully. "You said something before, about not letting hate take me. And I'm starting to think hate isn't what's driving me anymore," he said quietly. "It's truth. I can't stay quiet knowing what's still hidden." "Then promise me one thing," she whispered. "Find the truth, but don't let it ruin what's left of us." He nodded, though part of him already knew the cost. By nightfall, he was parked outside an apartment complex 2 towns over. The feds had given him partial access to the ongoing case files. Old habits die hard, especially for someone who once thrived on intel. The address was familiar. Kyle Carson, Fiona's brother-in-law. Accountant. Ordinary life. Ordinary mask. Through the window, Adrian saw him. Clean shirt, pressed slacks, sitting at his desk, laptop glowing blue. To anyone else, just another man doing late-night work. But to Adrian, it looked like betrayal in motion. He got out, rain starting again as he walked up the steps and knocked firmly. Kyle opened, surprise flickering into nerves instantly. "Adrian, I heard about Fiona." "Is she's alive," Adrian cut in. "And she remembers." Kyle's face softened. "Thank God. I meant to visit." "Don't," Adrian interrupted again, stepping forward. "We need to talk about your payments to the Harris family." Kyle froze, forced to laugh. "What payments?" "Adrian, you've been through hell. Maybe you're—" Adrian slammed a folded paper against his chest, a printed bank transfer record. 5,000 every other Friday. Same account tied to Evan's mother. "Don't lie." Kyle's lips parted, but no words came. His pulse hammered visibly in his throat. "It wasn't supposed to. I never meant." "You told them where she'd be that night," Adrian said quietly. "You set her up." Kyle stepped backward, shaking his head. No. I thought they'd scare her. That's all. I thought they'd take the bag and leave. I didn't think you didn't think." Adrian's voice grew sharper, steadier. "You didn't think they'd hurt a pregnant woman walking home alone." Kyle's knees buckled slightly, the weight of guilt crushing him. "I panicked. When I saw what happened, I paid Harris to bury it. To make it disappear. I thought, if no one knew, if she survived, maybe it could all go away." Adrian looked at him like a man seeing something inhuman pretending to be remorse. "It doesn't go away," he said softly. "Truth doesn't die just because you bury it." Then he turned and walked out, the sound of rain drowning Kyle's sobs. Back at the hospital, Harper spotted him in the corridor before he entered Fiona's room. She saw something unfamiliar in his eyes. Not fury, not even exhaustion, but grief. The kind that doesn't show itself in tears, only silence. "Adrian," she said cautiously, "you found something, didn't you?" He paused by the window. "Enough to break her heart. So I'll keep it until it doesn't destroy her anymore." Harper nodded slowly. "That might be the kindest thing you've done yet." He looked out into the rain, the lights from parking lot bleeding gold through the drops. "Kindness isn't what fixes the world," he murmured. "Truth does. Even if it burns everything first." Later that night, Fiona stirred awake again, murmuring his name. Adrian returned to her bedside, brushing her hair aside gently. "It's okay," he said, even though nothing really was. She squeezed his hand with the last of her strength before sleep took her again. As he sat in the dim light, watching her breathe, Adrian knew one thing for certain: justice wasn't over. There was one betrayal left to bring into light, one man still walking free behind a mask of family loyalty. The quiet revenge would continue, not through blood, but through exposure, truth spoken so loud it silenced lies forever. Outside, the storm gathered again, softer this time, more like a promise than a threat. The next morning came cold and uninviting, a pale sun hanging weak behind gray clouds. Adrian stood on the hospital rooftop, hands resting on the concrete rail, eyes drifting over the town below. Blackwood looked calm, too calm. He could see the courthouse, the diner, the sheriff's old office. All those places that once hid corruption now stood exposed, empty, waiting for judgment. His reflection in the glass door looked older, a little more ghost than man. Sleep still refused him. There were faces he couldn't shake. The 8 thugs, the sheriff, the trembling boy at the quarry, and now Kyle. Betrayal had eaten too many years of his life, first from war, then from home. He wasn't sure who he was anymore without it. The door creaked open behind him. Harper stepped out, her jacket pulled tight against the wind. "I figured I'd find you here," she said, joining him at the railing. "You look like someone waiting for a call that already came." Adrian gave a small nod. "Maybe I'm just waiting for it all to stop echoing." "You mean the guilt?" He turned his head toward her. "The silence. After revenge, it never feels quiet enough." Harper studied him for a long moment. "You could walk away now, Adrian. Fiona's healing. The federal case will bury the Harris family for good. You've already done the impossible." He stared straight ahead. The impossible was forgiving people like them. "I'm not there yet." She sighed softly. "Then what's next?" "Exposing the last one." Downstairs, Fiona was being wheeled into the hospital garden for light therapy. The sun caught in her hair as she watched birds move across the sky. Time stretched slower now. Each moment felt intentional, fragile, something pure returning piece by piece. When Adrian joined her, she smiled faintly. "You missed breakfast." "Wasn't hungry." "You never are." She gestured for him to sit beside her. "You ever going to tell me what's still bothering you?" Adrian sat down, his hands resting on his knees, watching the small flowers sway in the breeze. "Sometimes the worst wounds don't bleed. They just keep breathing." She nodded gently. "Whatever it is, let it go." He looked at her, then back toward the distance where the sky met the forest. "Some truths can't stay buried forever. You deserve to know who betrayed you. But not yet. Not until it brings peace instead of pain." Her eyes softened. "You still think you can control how truth hurts?" "I'm trying to control how it heals." They sat in silence a long time, until the nurse came to take her back inside. As the wheelchair rolled away, Fiona turned her head slightly and said, "You saved me, Adrian." "That's enough." He wanted to believe that. He wanted to let go. But that haunting calm inside him whispered otherwise. The war wasn't over. It had only changed its battlefield. That evening, he met with the federal agent heading the investigation, a worn-out woman named Deputy Fallon. Her office smelled like old coffee and new morality. Piles of case files stacked high around her desk. "You've done most of our job for us," she said, pulling a cigarette from the box but not lighting it. "The evidence against the Harris family is airtight. But there's another trail now. You know what I'm talking about." Adrian nodded slowly. "Kyle Carson." "Yeah. The brother-in-law. We traced payments from his firm to an offshore account connected to Harris's cleanup fund. He used false names, dummy charities. Smart, until now." Adrian leaned forward. "Then charge him." Fallon shook her head. "We can't. Not yet. Not without a signed testimony from Fiona linking him to her directly. Otherwise, it's just speculation." He sat back, jaw tightening. "You want her to relive that night again in court. She's the only one who can. And without her, he walks." Adrian's knuckles whitened around the chair's armrest. "Then I'll get him to confess." Fallon frowned. "How?" "Doesn't matter. I don't need violence. Just truth." Midnight found Adrian back at the same apartment building 2 towns over. The memory of the confrontation still fresh, the moment Kyle's mouth stumbled over excuses. This time, though, he didn't plan to shout. He planned to record. He wore a small lapel mic, connected to a transmitter under his jacket, feeding directly to a hidden phone in his truck. Years of reconnaissance made the setup feel like second nature. Only now, it wasn't foreign enemies he was exposing, it was family. He knocked twice. Kyle opened again, surprised, guilt still painted across his face. "We said everything that needed to be said," Kyle muttered. "You should be with her. Not here." "I'm giving you one chance," Adrian said. "Tell me everything. I'll walk away. You'll walk free." Kyle's breath hitched. "Adrian, please, in your own words. Why did you do it?" The silence stretched unbearable long, then broken by the quiet confession of a man cornered by conscience. "I was drowning in debt. Your death benefits were supposed to cover Fiona. But when you came back, she cut my support. Evans promised an easy job. Take her purse, scare her, get the cash. It was supposed to look like a mugging. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know they'd go that far. Every word poured from him like poison leaving a vein. Adrian didn't move a muscle, didn't blink. When the last word left his mouth, rain started outside again, a soft, steady rhythm, like punctuation on sin. Adrian turned, opened the door. Thanks, he said quietly. That's all I needed. What are you going to do with it? Kyle asked, voice shaking. Show her. At dawn, Adrian entered Fiona's room carrying nothing but a small drive. Her eyes opened when he sat down. One glance told her he was carrying truth she wasn't ready for. Whatever it is, she said, voice calm but trembling. Tell me. Adrian took a breath. It was Kyle. He gave them your route that night. He paid Harris to erase the evidence. Fiona stared at him, the world collapsing in silence between each heartbeat. Kyle, she whispered. He confessed. It's recorded. Tears welled in her eyes, silent, uncontrollable. He was family, Adrian. When you were overseas, he checked on me. I thought. Her voice cracked, the pain sharper than any wound. Adrian bowed his head. I wanted to protect you from this. No, she said softly. Truth hurts less than living a lie. She turned away, wiping her face, shoulders trembling. Promise me one thing, she said after a long pause. Don't hurt him. Let the law do what it couldn't before. Adrian nodded, though deep inside the soldier part of him resisted. I'll promise you that. He left her room calm but burning. Justice, this time, the quiet kind, was coming for Kyle, and Adrian would watch it unfold not with violence, but with patience. By evening, Deputy Fallon's office echoed with his recorded confession. She looked up, stunned. That's it. It's airtight. You've ended this for good. Adrian stood in the doorway, eyes tired but steady. Not for good, but for her. As he stepped out into the cold, the sunset painted the horizon in burnt gold, washing away the last of the storm. The soldier walked into peace he didn't fully understand yet, but for the first time, he wasn't fighting chaos. He was walking toward closure. The revenge was no longer silent. It was justice, steady, patient, undeniable. The story hit national news within 48 hours. Reporters parked vans along Blackwood's Main Street, cameras flashing where silence used to live. Headlines screamed, Navy SEAL exposes police corruption and family cover-up. The town that once worshipped its sheriff now avoided saying his name. Adrian stayed out of sight, holed up in a small motel on the hill just outside town. The window overlooked the streets crawling with strangers holding microphones. Each time the television played his footage of Kyle's confession, he turned away. He hadn't done this for fame. He'd done it for Fiona, and the child who might still have a future. Inside the hospital, Fiona was finally walking short distances, her steps slow but steady. Harper walked beside her with cautious pride. The prosecutors called, she said gently. They said Kyle's being transferred to county jail until trial. You won, Fiona. Fiona stopped by the window, watching the rain-streaked glass. No, she whispered, we just survived. Around the same time, Adrian drove through the heart of Blackwood. The air felt different now, sharp, aware, every face turning toward his passing truck. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a rumor people spoke about in lowered voices. Some called him a hero. Others called him a man who did what no one else dared. He parked near a corner store and stepped out, glancing at the bulletin board plastered with arrest photos. Evan Harris, pending trial. Riley Knox, missing. Trent Dower, surrendered. Each face marked another sin finally reaching daylight. He scanned the posters coldly until his gaze stopped on one photo missing a stamp. The eighth man. No arrest, no charges filed. Just a name, Grayson Hale. The one who'd never been caught that night. Under the board, someone had scrawled in red pen, his brother runs the scrapyard off Highway 7. Adrian folded the clipping, slid it into his pocket, and walked back to the truck. The scrapyard was a maze of twisted metal and ghosts of forgotten machines. Rust coated everything, turning color to dust. Adrian parked between two piles of broken cars and listened. Dogs barked somewhere behind the fence. Chains rattled, a welder hissed, and between the noise came laughter drifting from inside a metal shed. He approached quietly, footsteps soft on gravel. The door stood half open. Inside, 3 figures around a barrel fire. One of them, older, heavier, drunkenly telling a story about a crazy vet who'd built his own war over some girl. The others laughed too loud, too nervous. Then the heavier one turned, and the laughter died. He'd seen Adrian. "You," Grayson hissed, face hardening. "The soldier." Adrian stepped closer. "You ran that night." Grayson squared his shoulders, defiant. "Because I knew what was coming. I knew if I stayed, I'd end up dead like the rest." "You're not dead yet," Adrian said, calm as winter air. Grayson's shaky bravado broke. "Look, man, I didn't even touch her. Evan made me go." Adrian's expression didn't change. "You watched. That's enough." The other 2 bolted toward the back, scrambling over barrels. Adrian didn't chase. His focus stayed locked on Grayson. The man's eyes darted toward the door, weighing a run. "You made one right choice tonight," Adrian said quietly. "You didn't pull your gun. Because you'd end me before I blinked." Adrian nodded once. "Smart." He took out a folded photo from his jacket pocket, a copy of the ultrasound. He held it just long enough for Grayson to see it, to feel its weight. "This," Adrian said softly, "is what you almost erased." Grayson's gaze dropped, breath shaking. "I didn't know she was pregnant." That should have never mattered. Lightning cracked in the distance, and for a moment, both stood in the flicker of white. Adrian turned and walked out, voice low behind him. "When the agents come, tell them everything. You owe somebody more than fear now." He never looked back. The confession from the scrapyard hit the news later that night. Grayson Hale surrendered, handing over a list of names, phone logs, and hidden accounts that connected the corrupted line further than anyone imagined. Politicians, police chiefs, judges. The press called it the Blackwood Network. To the world, it was explosive justice. To Adrian, it was finally quiet. He drove back toward town under a slate-gray sky, the storm clouds thinning. When he parked outside the hospital, Fiona was standing at her window, her figure framed by soft light. He waved once before heading inside. The smell of disinfectant and flowers welcomed him back into her room. She turned, weak smile blooming like something alive again. "They said it's over." He shook his head. "Not over, but close." She touched his hand gently. "You can stop running now." He looked at her, not at the bruises fading, not at the bandages, but at the strength behind her eyes. "You're the reason I didn't lose myself completely," he said quietly. "You're the reason this town still has something worth saving." Fiona reached for his hand, her voice trembling but proud. "Then stop saving it. Start living in it." Outside, that same day, news drones filmed crowds marching down Main Street carrying signs. Justice for Fiona. Truth for Blackwood. Adrian watched from a bench across the street, face shadowed by a cap. He didn't join the crowd. The people had their voices back, and that was enough. Across the square, he caught sight of Harper helping Fiona into a wheelchair, careful, protective. Fiona spotted him and raised a hand in greeting. For the first time in months, Adrian smiled, not with revenge, but relief. That night, he drove to the outskirts again, where the town lights faded into open road. He pulled over, stood beside the truck, and looked up at the moon. He took the ultrasound photo from his pocket, creased, smudged, but still holding that faint heartbeat frozen in time. He whispered into the night, voice rough, "You made me something better than a soldier. You made me human again." From the distance came faint music from a bar, laughter spilling into the wind. Life was moving on, as it should. He folded the photo once more and slid it back over his chest. Turning toward the dark highway, he drove. The horizon glowed faint with city lights. Justice wasn't something you finished. It was something you learned to live with. Morning came clear and gold, sunlight resting soft across the hills outside town. For the first time in months, Blackwood tasted peace. The news trucks were gone, the courthouse lawn empty. The people who had once looked away from corruption now stood taller, free from the shadow that had ruled them. Adrian sat in the hospital garden with a folded newspaper on his lap. The headline read, "Ex-sheriff, son, and local financier found guilty. Federal case closed." Beneath the photo, a smaller line caught his eye. "Anonymous veteran credited with exposing local crime network." He folded it over. He didn't need the credit. Heroes were just survivors who hadn't broken yet. Inside, Fiona was packing her things. Harper stood by the doorway with a clipboard, smiling faintly. "You get to go home today," she said. "Doctor's orders." Fiona's reply came quiet but steady. "Home doesn't feel like the same place anymore." "It doesn't have to," Harper said. "It can be better." By noon, the hospital corridor echoed with the sound of wheels against tile. Fiona sat in the wheelchair, gazing ahead while Adrian walked beside her, silent as ever. The elevator doors opened, and sunlight flooded the lobby. They stepped out into the parking lot. The air smelled of wet soil and summer beginnings. Adrian opened the truck door for her, careful, like touching something sacred. Halfway through the drive home, Fiona reached out. "What happens to Kyle?" Adrian kept his eyes on the empty road. "He's in custody. Trial's next month." The recording was enough. She turned her head toward the wind, hair brushing her face. "I keep replaying everything. I can't hate him, no matter how much I should." Adrian nodded slowly. "That's the difference between you and them. Hate would have killed you long before they ever touched you." She looked at his reflection in the window. "And what about you?" He didn't answer. The silence between them said enough. They reached the small farmhouse at the edge of town, their home before everything fell apart. Grass had grown wild across the porch, dust coating the window frames. Adrian stepped out first, unlocked the door, and stood still before crossing the threshold. Inside, everything smelled like memory, warm once, cold now. Fiona's fingers brushed an old photograph on the shelf. Her and Adrian in uniform, laughing, the world still simple. She whispered, "Feels like another lifetime." "It was," he said. He helped her sit near the window. Birds filled the yard, chirping freely again. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her rediscover the space. After a long silence, she asked, "Are you staying?" He looked at her, eyes softening. "You want me to?" "I don't know what I want anymore," she said, voice trembling. "Everything that happened, it changed what home means." Adrian nodded. "Home's not a place anymore. It's what survives after destruction." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Then maybe we can rebuild." That evening, Deputy Fallon arrived with her usual efficiency, case folder under her arm. "There's one more thing," she said to Adrian. "We recovered a last audio log from the sheriff's server, something that didn't make it into the news." Adrian frowned. "What is it?" She handed him a USB drive. "You'll want to hear this yourself. It's about why they targeted Fiona in the first place." He hesitated, then plugged it into his laptop. The speakers hissed before a familiar gravel-rough voice filled the room. The old sheriff talking to someone muffled on the other end. "She knows. About the funds. The soldiers' compensation went missing. Kyle funneled half of it through her trust account. Clean trail, easy access. If she talks, we all burn." Adrian froze, jaw tightening. Fiona turned pale. The recording continued. "Handle it however you need to. Just make it look like a robbery. No loose ends." Then silence. Fiona's hands shook as tears slipped down her cheeks. "He used my name, my husband's service money." Adrian closed the laptop, voice steady but cold. "It wasn't about you. It was about greed. You were just the weight they thought could be removed quietly." He stood, pacing to the window, fists locked. That's what this whole town became. People using someone else's sacrifice to buy their peace. Fiona wiped her tears, whispering, "What happens now?" Adrian turned back. "Now we let the world hear it." Within days, the recording spread online, sealing every open wound the trial had left behind. People who once defended the sheriff came forward with apologies and evidence of their own. The federal court reopened investigations statewide, all stemming from that single town, that single night. Blackwood became a story about reckoning, how truth demanded its own kind of violence, exposure. And it had started with one widow's survival. For Adrian and Fiona, fame wasn't what followed. Peace did, finally, quietly. On a Sunday morning weeks later, the courtroom buzzed under the fluorescent lights. Kyle sat trembling as the judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, attempted cover-up. His eyes didn't seek Adrian or Fiona. They stayed on the floor, where shame lived heavier than chains. When the court adjourned, Fiona stood tall beside Adrian. She didn't look back as they walked out. No need. Justice wasn't spectacle, it was truth fulfilled. Outside, cameras waited, reporters shouting questions, but Adrian guided her past them. The world would say what it wanted. They were done talking. She slipped her hand into his. It's really over now. He nodded. It is. That night, they sat on the porch beneath a wide, clear sky. The land smelled of rain long gone, of the kind of peace that felt earned. Fiona rested her head against his shoulder. You ever think about leaving? Starting somewhere new? Adrian stared out into the dark horizon. No, the world's loud enough. This is where silence belongs. She smiled faintly. Then silence it is. They stayed there until stars blinked into being, saying nothing more. Tomorrow would come with its own light, clean, safe, untangled from the past. The sky over Blackwood turned gold that morning, soft, forgiving, nothing like the nights that came before it. The whole town was awake early, but it wasn't fear or gossip driving them anymore. It was relief. Justice had finally overtaken everything that used to hide in shadows. Adrian stood on the porch, a cup of coffee warming his hands, the horizon stretching endless before his eyes. The world looked new, dusted clean. Behind him, Fiona's gentle steps echoed softly across the wood. She looked stronger now, no longer the fragile light he'd fought to protect, but the kind that guided him home. She asked quietly, "Does it feel real yet?" He smiled faintly. "It feels earned." They sat beside each other, watching sunlight fall over the yard, the fields breathing under the wind. No soldiers, no sirens, no guilt, just quiet life reclaiming its place. The sound of laughter floated from across the road. Harper was there, waving as she placed fresh flowers near their gate, a little tribute that had become a morning ritual for the whole neighborhood. Fiona watched silently, then turned to Adrian. "I used to think revenge was something you finish." Adrian shook his head. "It's something you outgrow. When truth takes its place, revenge can finally sleep." She reached into her dress pocket and handed him a small envelope. Inside lay a clear ultrasound picture, the new one from last week. The outline of new life curved bright and steady. "The doctor said everything's normal," she whispered, eyes glistening. Adrian touched the photo gently, his throat tight. For the first time in a long time, his tears weren't born of pain. They were made of peace. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "This time," he said, "nothing stands in our way." They stayed like that for a long moment, listening to the world breathe again. The story that had begun with loss was ending with life. The house that once felt haunted now held laughter in its walls. As daylight deepened, a faint hum drifted through the town, the sound of normal life returning. Someone fixed a window. Someone painted over the graffiti that still scarred the sheriff's office. People rebuilding piece by piece. Inside, Adrian opened a small box and laid inside it all the things that defined their struggle: his military tag, the ultrasound photo from that night, and the folded newspaper headline. He closed the lid softly and placed it on the shelf. The past no longer needed to be carried. It had finally found a place to rest. Fiona spoke behind him, voice warm. "Do you ever think about what comes after peace?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Maybe that's the question everyone should ask. What do you do when revenge is done, and the world finally stops fighting you back?" She smiled. "Maybe you live." He nodded. And for the first time since the war, he felt free enough to believe it. As the evening sun turned copper, the camera of imagination pulls back, past the porch, past the trees, past the quiet town healed by truth and courage. The world kept moving, but the storm that once swallowed two people had finally passed. And somewhere, beneath that same sky, someone watching this story might wonder, what would you fight for if fate tested everything you loved? Would you choose revenge or redemption? If this story touched you, hit that like and subscribe button gently.